Here then is a game that is old man individual nostalgia boiled down to its purest form. There is a very distinct band of people who will know the show on which this game is based. They will be British, of primary school age or earlier in 1989, and likely to have seen this underneath a duvet on a sick day, or with Unilever baby food smeared across their tiny toddler mushes. Either that, or they were shown it on that most exciting of days, when the hulking CRT was wheeled into a classroom. What fine days they were, eh? You'll have to bide with us, Corey in California and Carlos in Catalonia, as this is going to be a bit of an insular episode for British viewers. Through the Dragon's Eye was tucked away in the daytime schedules, and even worse, it was educational. Yet there was something captivating about it. It became legendary to those who viewed it. Perhaps it was the ongoing fantasy story, or that it had a production budget that was a little bit higher than other preschool programming, or that there was a fella traipsing around in what was a pretty decent for the time dragon costume. Anyway, something stuck. 35 years on, and the mention of Through the Dragon's Eye will see people of a particular age giddy with nostalgic warmth, and if they look a bit confused, just add that kids show that had the fella in the dragon costume, and you'll almost certainly get an "oh yes," and they will then beam like the headlights of a BMW on a foggy night. Originally broadcast from the 19th of September to the 28th of November 1989, and then repeated several times throughout the 1990s, Through the Dragon's Eye was part of the BBC's Look and Read literacy improvement programme for primary age school children. And if you're struggling to remember what Look and Read was, well, the most recognisable figure was undoubtedly the nightmare-inducing hovering Petr Checkhead, known as Wordy. Never mind your Winnie the Pooh horror movies, this thing needs to be slicing teenagers up in a low-budget Lionsgate production. Look at him, he's hideous. The story of Through the Dragon's Eye was that three school children named Jenny, Amanda and Scott were transported to the magical world of Pelar by a magical dragon called Garwen. Garwen, despite being a dragon with magical dimension warping abilities, needs these children to save Pelar by locating the scattered exploded pieces of the life source of the land called the Vita Core. Now, what abilities do these children have? Well, they can bloody read, that's what. See how important reading is? You can save fantasy worlds with it. They, Garwen, a giant mouse called Rhodey, and the Vita Core keepers, who did a bit of a shoddy job by the looks of it, called Boris, Doris and Morris, must journey across the land of Widge and reclaim the Vita Core using their educational skill set in it. Standing in their way is Charn, who is a power-hungry arsehole. Screw you, Charn. Charn doesn't turn up in the game at all, though. The computer game is unsurprisingly, but yet still, unfortunately for all of us, an educational title. Sorry. I'm sorry if you are hoping for a one-on-one beat-em-up, so was I. It was programmed by Longman Logotron, who made a lot of educational titles throughout their brief history. Initially, Through the Dragon's Eye came out on the BBC Micro to tie in with the series in 1989, though there was a version on the Archimedes that followed in late 1992, which was near identical barring a few aesthetic improvements. The story of the game is that of the series, although vastly truncated. After the intro sequence gives us the storyline of the series, Boris and Amanda, they find themselves stood on a stack of clouds, needing your help to end a series of words which will then disperse the cloud beneath them. Through the Dragon's Eye here, setting its stall out early. It's going to teach you about words and not physics. If children go out and stand on clouds, that's down to Garwen and the Look and Read team. The troublesome locals known as the Widgets, who clearly don't want to help restore life to their world, well, they've only gone and bloody hidden a Vuitton piece in a tree. Garwen should incinerate them for being little turds. Anyway, they want you to unscramble a word for them because they're evidently none too bright. Pass, and you will, and you get to enter the tree by its door. A door made from wood on a tree. That's like wearing someone else's dead skin. The interior of the tree is clearly some sort of TARDIS, as it contains a maze that you'll have to navigate slowly through using directional commands. For example, R and 3 to take 3 steps to the right, L and 1 to take 1 step to the left, and U2 to form the band in Ireland in the 1980s. If you walk into a wall, you'll have to restart the whole thing again, which is definitely not going to inspire anger in people of various ages who keep rushing through it and slamming into the walls. Yes, me, what a sack of shit I am. Through the maze, and you're in a room with a box and a bookcase, and the option to search either for the Vita core. Here's the thing I didn't know when I was playing. There's no wrong answer, it's in both. I thought I was dead smart when I found it my first go with my 50-50 guess. Such namby-pamby hand-holding for this preschool game. You should be ashamed, long man Logotron. They both have different puzzles, so best make sure you are a huge swot and you've studied hard on your first year of primary school English. Next up, we've got what constitutes as a cutscene on the BBC Micro, as Garwin is the sensible dragon adult who sees that the road is safe and therefore directs the crew accordingly. And of course it isn't, it's those widget twats again. They've directed you into the icy tundra. I don't want to be in the icy tundra, thank you. You're asked a very nebulous question to start proceedings in this snow-swept landscape. What might be useful out of these objects? This is very much trial and error, as you'll have no idea of what awaits. So I personally went for the torch, the rope and the net, which is only a 1/3 correct. If you make the wrong choices though, the next sequence will just loop round until you get it right. This very short part of the game is as close as the game gets to being a text adventure, a 50-second one. Once you've avoided getting brained by rocks by simply choosing a helmet and saying a magic spell, your very swift visit to the tundra is done, and you'll have liberated the next Veton from a mountain overpass hitting you in the head. The next sequence has you writing a poem for Boris about a hamster in order to retrieve a map from a waterfall. This actually sounds like the sort of ridiculous thing former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson would have done on the news to distract from whatever embarrassing bit of self-serving corruption he'd been doing that week. They're all the same, these Borisi? For some reason, once you've filled the gaps with the correct words, it lets you do freeform jazz poetry with the words that don't scan. Stop it, educational game. That's not how poems work. You'll destroy our children's knowledge of how poems work. Before your magic map liberating poems have a chance to warp the map of Widge to your hand, 2 Widge folk appear and pinch it. They challenge you to a word game in order to get it back. Gorwin, you are one emasculated dragon dude, just threaten them. Who you choose to play with alters the word game you play, but you shouldn't struggle too much unless you've got the mental capacity of a dedicated Mrs. Brown's Boys fan. The next section has you trying to navigate a map. And we've got a bit of a maths puzzle this time out. Ooh, we're mixing it up. We've got to try and work out the best route to the final Veton with a series of questions here. As we approach the last Veton, we find that Scott has it and he's about to fall out of a tree. And the widgets might save him, but only if we can answer their yes or no questions. You bloody little sociopaths, that's a child's safety. Never before has there been such a detestable civilization as these widget fellows. With Scott safely on terra firma, the crew dash back to reassemble the Vita core. You have to answer questions related to shapes, such as the amount of edges and sides each one has, in order to get the device churning out life energy again. Once that's all in place, you'll have one final word arrangement puzzle spell to tell, and then you're done with a little bit of epilepsy triggering sequencing and a thank you from Garwin for your heroic deeds of entry-level English language bravery. So there, I've described the game in its entirety. A Ron seal of a game doing exactly as was indicated on the educational tin. A game for the classroom, not one you'd fire up in place of Repton or Elite on your BBC. It's difficult to criticise this game as an adult 35 years later after being its target audience though. I'm sure I'd be a very captivated 5-year-old and a very disinterested 10-year-old in 1989, if that helps. But as a person in their late 40s, it's just a very brief and untaxing excuse to remember an old telly show that I liked. which has also aged pretty badly too, just like me. The only review I could locate from the time was from a publication called B-Bug, and they described the £12.95 offering as a purposeful, stimulating and worthwhile game that links to a television show with which children are familiar. It is interesting to speculate for how long software producers can and will continue to come up with material of this quality. So they quite liked it. On the next episode of Games Based on TV series, we asked 100 people which TV-related title they'd least like to hear about. And our survey said, Family Fortunes on the Nintendo DS. Like, subscribe. And Kay, thanks, bye.